So we have it 12:30. So if you want to just for those of you here, we've got like, have we got 14, 15, 16, 17? Oh, lots of people. This is actually more for an event like this. This is actually more crowded than I actually expected. So thank you to everybody who is watching right now. And if you're watching the recording, thank you very much for tuning in after the fact. We're here with Rob and Faye from the LGBT Foundation, Manchester's premier LGBTQI plus charity, I guess. Rob, Faye, Rob, Faye, if you could just tell us a little bit about what you do at the foundation and a little bit about the foundation itself and why it's so important.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and thanks for that warm welcome. It's really appreciated, Anthony. I've definitely got Star Wars envy in terms of that poster behind you. Me and Anthony were talking before about the fact that we're both kind of like Star Wars, geeks, and actually, how amazing the films are. So I've definitely got poster envy. I think what we were going to do was just we've got a PowerPoint presentation, so I was going to sort of pick up the first couple of slides and then Faye's going to, and the last couple, and then Faye's going to do the middle bit. So we're going to do this jointly with myself and Faye. And yeah, I mean, I've worked at the LGBT Foundation for 13 years, so as Deputy Chief Exec for the last 5 years. So I can remember the days when we were the Lesbian and Gay Foundation. And I think probably it's fair to say that over the last few years, we've delivered we've expanded and deliver a lot more services now and a lot more different projects. So we're quite well known for our helpline, our telephone support service, where we get people contacting us for a range of different reasons, whether that's, people need a friendly chat, move to Manchester, new to the area, want to meet some friends, want to connect with people, reduce isolation, or it might be around, we do get suicidal calls still. And I think that, the country that we live in at the moment, it's difficult times in terms of COVID and lots of different other areas. And we've definitely seen a massive increase in terms of people contacting us. We're also quite well known in terms of our condom and lube safer sex scheme that people will see in the bars and different community centres that we deliver them. But there's a whole host of other projects as well, which I'll touch upon them in a second and go through them. Do you want to introduce yourself, Faye, just before I plunge into this slide?
Sure. So, hi everyone, my name's Faye. Thank you so much for having us here. We really do appreciate all of your continued support. I'm the Corporate Partnerships Coordinator at LGBT Foundation. I've been here for just under 2 years, but prior to that, I was a volunteer as well for 2 years. So I've been involved with LGBT Foundation for the past sort of 4 years. And so my main role is to look after our supporters, but mainly corporate organisations like ANS, who are really vital in terms of being able to helping us delivering our services, which Rob, which I think you'll elaborate on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So in terms of the LGBT Foundation, our vision is that we believe in a fair and equal society where all lesbian, gay, bisexual and trans people can achieve their full potential. So, our work isn't just about tackling the issues that LGBT people face, like things like hate crime or maybe challenges around coming out or, issues such as discrimination, stuff like homophobia, biphobia and transphobia. It's not just about trying to deal with issues. It's actually about helping people achieve their full potential. In terms of whether that's volunteers that kind of develop with us and actually become employed with us, which, I mean, Faye's an example of that. Faye used to be a volunteer for us, or whether that's trying to do some work around community leadership. So supporting LGBT people at a grassroots level to, lobby the council, lobby different stakeholders about making sure that LGBT people's needs are met. So our mission is here if you need us. We try and support people in different ways. So I mentioned about the telephone support before, about making sure that, if people contact us, we are here if you need us. I think probably certainly since COVID, we've seen a big increase in terms of telephone calls to us, also email inquiries. I think that, people have, I think we're going to talk about COVID a little bit later, so I'm probably jumping ahead of myself there, but certainly one of the things we've seen with COVID is that, an increase in terms of anxiety and loneliness for our communities. And we work in terms of like three themes really. One is about achieving equality. So some of that will be around our policy work, our communications that we do, our online work. We do encouraging well-being, which will be about our range of different services that we deliver, which I'll touch upon some of them in a second. And thirdly, about promoting safety. One of our flagship projects is about Village Angels, where we have members of staff and volunteers out on around Manchester Canal Street area every Friday and every Saturday till about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. They're dealing with people that they've had issues where they've literally fished people out of the canal. They work closely with the police and the ambulance service in terms of making sure that we're keeping people safe. There's a lot of people actually that are kind of accessing the village that have got mental health needs as well. So you would think of the issues that people are encountering as predominantly around alcohol and for some people substance issues as well, but it's actually wider than that. It's stuff around mental health and confidence issues and etc. So I should probably keep to the script really. So I'm going to go to the right hand side of the presentation and I'll run through the colours. So the first one, in terms of the red one, is about the fact that we support over 40,000 LGBT people each and every year, whether that's through our community centre, which we just left our community centre actually. I don't know if people are aware of that, but we've just handed the keys back because we want to find some space that is a bit more accessible and kind of look at what community space we need within the context of COVID and as we hopefully at some point kind of hopefully move beyond COVID. But our reach extends to kind of the telephone support, online communications, and a range of programs that we do, and actually being a bit of a home for people really. So quite a lot of LGBT groups would meet in the space that we have as well. I've mentioned quite a bit about the helpline that goes back to 1975. That always makes me feel really, really old because I was born in 1975, so I can't forget that the helpline was kind of born in the same year that I was. And we actually get a range of different calls and people. I think it's easy to see that for many people it is easier to come out nowadays. It is people are coming out generally speaking at a younger age at school. We can obviously we get married, we've got equal marriage, equal age consent. So over the last sort of 20 years or so, we've had massive change in terms of legislation. And I think that gives a bit of a perception that, well, it's fine actually. Why do we need the LGBT Foundation? Everything's fine. I know some gay friends, or I work with some LGBT people. What's the issue? And we see the issue in terms of the reasons why people phone us, or the reason why people access our services. So although there's been loads of good progress, there's lots of stuff still to do. Our condom and lube scheme, the yellow box, celebrated its 25th year birthday last year, and we've been distributing condoms and lube and doing a range of different sexual health information and campaigns particularly across Greater Manchester. We've also obviously have to demonstrate not just kind of the outcome of our work and the output and the benefits of it. We also increasingly with funders have to talk about the cost benefit analysis, what kind of financial worth it's bringing to our partners. So that green box talks about for every £2 invested in our sexual health and mental health services, we generate an in-year fiscal saving of £11. So that's about the fact that no surprises really. If you invest in prevention services, if you invest in supporting people and putting money in prevention services, then it saves the system as a whole, funders some money further down the line. The blue box is talking about Pride in Practice. So that's one of our flagship projects, where Pride in Practice is a quality assurance toolkit for primary care professionals, so not just GPs, but also dentists and opticians. We're also starting to take it out into other spaces like hospital settings, for example. And the way that works is that if it was a GP surgery, for example, we would work with the local providers. They would do a self-assessment. They would complete the self-assessment. We would work alongside them in terms of, providing support around sort of use of language, putting training on, etc. They get a nice plaque at the end where we can, they can sort of demonstrate their commitment to LGBT people. And we have noticed a difference in terms of, some patients actually choosing to be at those particular GPs that have got that kite mark. And linked to that project, actually, we've recently launched an LGBT Foundation training academy. So that's kind of bite-sized chunks of training around, whether that's around kind of LGBT knowledge or to stuff like accessing healthcare, etc., which we're getting good feedback on. The purple box, I've mentioned a little bit about communication channels. We have a very kind of active Twitter account, an active website, and I think that, one of the things that working at the LGBT Foundation, it's always really challenging to kind of explain everything we do, because we do so many different things. So our comms colleagues have got sort of an unenviable challenge, really, in terms of like trying to highlight the range of different stuff that we do. And obviously in the run up to Manchester Pride, all our work is going virtual. So we've got a programme of events called Pride at Home, which is about encouraging people to enjoy Pride, but to kind of access a range of our programme that's going online. So community groups that are meeting online. We're doing net reach till 2 o'clock in the morning on the gay social dating sites and Facebook, and our telephone support service is 2 o'clock in the morning, Friday to the Monday of Pride. And the pink box was about community safety, which I think I've mentioned that about Village Angels and the kind of work that they do. So I'll stop there, and I think it's Faye next.
Just got a couple of points I'd like to make. Just say thank you for that so far. I think it's interesting, and I think it's important for a lot of people to understand that because we've made so much as a community, we've made so much progress since. Well, everyone remembers Section 28, and the age of consent was when I came out, it was 21. So, effectively, in the eyes of the law, I was raped. Do you know, it's things like that which were just not true. And it was that we've made such huge progress. But I'm always surprised to hear that the number of calls these helplines like yours get increases year on year. And I think a lot of people assume that because my mum, you think of Graham Norton's, Alan Carr's, my mum says that LGBTQI life is so prominent on TV and it's so widely accepted by so many people that it's become such a non-issue in many groups of people. But in other groups of people, it is still such a huge issue and such a huge problem, and there's so much hate that I think it's really important to stress that when everyone thinks, well, you've got equality, you've got gay marriage, you have all these things, and you have to realize that it's the long fight. We're still fighting. And just the same with feminism, for example, it's the long fight, and it's one step at a time every single day. And I think that we link our trans brothers and sisters out there, and they're now the ones who are being the focal point of a lot of hatred, that I think it's really important that people understand that, it is getting better, but not for everybody.
Yeah.
And that's what's really important to understand. And Robert
Absolutely.
says in chat that he says we're going backwards in part of Europe. Exactly. Look what's happened in Poland in the last couple of weeks.
Yes.
We have to be very, very mindful of the fact that things aren't as easy as you think they are, because Graham Norton's on TV and in the Eurovision movie, which, by the way, everyone has to watch because it's amazing. But So that's why I think it's quite important. But yeah, anyway, continue. I just wanted to make that point because I think it's easy for people to assume that everything's just normal and that you've got equality. So, shut up about it when really it's the long fight.
Completely. And I think just to add to that, I think we've had the legislation, and that's great and that's really good. But actually, people, for example, people can get married now, which is like something that you wouldn't have thought possible even like 10 or 15 years ago. But the culture's not caught up with the legislation. It's like the legislation has moved ahead of the culture, and that's we still see, unfortunately, we still see people ringing us about suicidal thoughts or kind of like some really like difficult situations that people are in.
Yeah,
exactly.
and I also do want to add that, again, just to echo what Rob's saying about how we've achieved, equality legislation. We have more rights than ever before, in the UK. But actually, we know that LGBT people, experience poor health outcomes. They're more likely to have mental health issues, more likely to engage in substances, and things like that. So I think it's just really important that we're mindful that even though we have legal rights, actually, we still have a long way to go in terms of social and health inequality.
100%, 100%, yeah. And before we move on, I just want to say thank you very much for the sex packs, because that used to be what we called them when we would go to Canal Street, and you'd be like, hold on, I just need to run and get a sex pack from Via Fossa. So I do appreciate that.
Thank you.
Anyway,
Yep.
cool, lovely. Moving on.
Okay, so Rob's given a really good overview of what LGBT Foundation is about and what we do. But just before I move on, I do want to add that if you've got any questions at any point during the presentation, then please do feel free to put them in the chat. Hopefully we'll have enough time at the end to address them, or if not, we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So, as we all know, COVID-19 is very much the topic of the day at the moment, and it has been for quite some time. So today I'll be talking to you about the impacts of COVID on LGBT Foundation, on LGBT communities, and Rob later will be give you a bit of information about how COVID has impacted LGBT charities like ours. So first off, I want to show you this 90-second film, which we released a month or so ago. And it's called Locked Down and Out. And it's about the experiences of a young trans woman called Zoe, who is living with an abusive mother. Before we play the video, I do want to add that this can be quite sensitive. So if you do want to take a couple of minutes to take a step back, that's absolutely fine. And you can come back and join us. So Anthony, if you... Thanks.
I'm going to share my screen now because I can share the audio as well. So, okay, lovely. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Yeah. Perfect. I'm just going to mute myself.
I just love this blush. Okay, a super easy step to get more natural looking lashes. Grab a pair of flat tweezers, separate the lashes one by one, and there we have it, a simple, beautiful eyelash.
What are you doing? We agreed you would stop this! Why are you doing this again?
Holy shit. There's the link to the YouTube video there for people who want to watch it again later, but that was pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah, okay. So I guess the short video really sets a scene in terms of what we've been seeing through our services. It gives you a glimpse of who the people are that are coming to us for support and the issues that they might present with. And so this leads us into how COVID has impacted on LGBT Foundation. In 6 days, we moved from what was exclusively a face-to-face service offer to becoming a remote service delivery charity. Referrals to our services have increased by 140% this time last year, and calls to the helpline have tripled this time last year. And you can see below some infographics. So we've seen a 450% increase in calls about biphobia, 100% increase in calls about transphobia, and 52% increase in calls about homophobia. We're hearing a lot of stories as an organisation of people who do not feel safe to be out or to be themselves. And this could be a young person like Zoe, like we saw in the previous video, where she's living with a LGBT phobic family. But we've also heard stories of, for example, there was an older trans woman who came to us, and she was afraid of going out to the shops because ordinarily she would go in the early opening hours when there'll be less people. But during lockdown, we've seen that the early opening hours have been reserved for, for example, healthcare workers. And we're also seeing young adult professionals who have had to move back to their family home from their house or flat share because it's not safe. So in effect, they've been trading their emotional well-being for physical safety. One of the key issues that have arisen out of the crisis is domestic abuse. And you can see in the statistics below that we've had 38% increase in the people that are being referred into our domestic abuse programme. Another 38% increase in calls about domestic abuse to our helpline. And you can see that we've had a significant increase in people visiting our domestic abuse web pages. In more normal times, LGBT people were more likely than the general population to experience domestic abuse anyway. And actually, they did experience barriers within mainstream services. And this has not really changed in COVID times. In fact, COVID has made things worse. To kind of highlight this further, there are no LGBT-specific refuges that exist in England, and less than 1% of refuges nationally actually provide support to LGBT survivors. So this kind of paints a very bleak picture, actually, because what we're seeing is an unprecedented rise in domestic abuse, but very few specialist support services. So what have we done as an organisation? We've changed the way that we work, and so almost all of our services are now available by online or by telephone. We've developed a number of resources, for example, a guide to LGBT rights during the pandemic, and that's looking at, for example, how to report a hate crime, how to access medication, particularly as antidepressants are in shortage at the moment, as well, and also transition-related medication. We've also developed some guidance around safer sex during the pandemic, especially as there are limitations in terms of sexual health screenings at this time. We've also developed our new wellbeing hub, and so this is a bank of tools and resources to help LGBT people through this difficult and challenging time. And so touching on the issue of domestic abuse that I just talked about earlier, we've developed a resource on how people can affirm their LGBT identity during this time. And this could be something simple as, you know, printing a picture of a LGBT hero like Alan Turing, for example. It's just those little things that can really go a long way in terms of helping LGBT people feeling more connected to the wider LGBT community. Volunteers are, you know, the absolute lifeblood of our organisation, and you know, we really couldn't do what we do without our volunteers. And so we've developed and launched a volunteer wellbeing fund, and that's to help alleviate any financial hardship that our volunteers might be experiencing, and you know, to help things like you know, helping them with food supplies, just to make sure that that we are offering as much support as we possibly can. And in the crisis, we've also developed a new service called Rainbow Brew Buddies, which is a telephone befriending scheme for isolated LGBT people in Greater Manchester. And actually, we're in conversations about potentially expanding that further. So the next slide is, I'll hand over to Rob. That's looking at the impact of COVID on LGBT charities.
Thanks, Faye. And I suppose it's just to say that COVID-19 is obviously having an impact on all of us as individuals and as organisations as well. And you know, a lot of charities are really struggling. It depends on what the charities and what I would say is about a lot of charities are seeing is kind of that double whammy effect of, on the one hand, like a big increase in terms of number of people accessing services, but a decrease in terms of the resource that they have, the money that they have. So that's kind of the fundamental challenge, I think, in terms of charities. And we're not immune to that. We've lost, there's some income that we've lost directly. So, for example, we used to get some income from hiring out some of our venue space. That's completely gone. And we are seeing, although we still get corporate support, and that's great, we used to get more inquiries around that. Things like Manchester Pride, you know, not happening in the same way has an impact on us, because that a part of the profit from Manchester Pride would go to us. Well, that's, you know, that activity is not happening in the same way now. In terms of some of the initial research that's been done in terms of LGBT organisations, so the LGBT Consortium, which is an umbrella organisation that supports a range of different LGBT organisations around funding, training, etc. They did an insight report which has looked at the impact in terms of financial impact. So 47% of LGBT organisations have reported an immediate loss of earnings and had to cut staff hours, reduce services. 38% have seen a reduction in donations or forecast a loss, and 20% are concerned that they will have to close due to financial impact of the pandemic. So the stuff that we're seeing in the news about, you know, big businesses closing, or, you know, the challenges that the airline companies have got, and, you know, we've got like almost like an hourly update on our news channels, haven't we, in terms of the difficulties that businesses are in. Well, charities are in that place of challenge as well. I think for us, although we have seen an immediate impact, I think our concern is about future years, because, you know, similar to some other charities, we'll get income from local authorities, for example, and the NHS. Well, if their budgets get cut, you know, if local authorities' budgets get cut from you know, they get less money from national sources, that will just be passed on to, unfortunately, get passed on to charities as well. So I think, you know, we're trying to do a lot of work in terms of diversifying our funding, but also talking to people, talking to funders and potential funders about the need that we're seeing, you know, in terms of those stats that Faye was sharing before, in terms of the percentage increase of people accessing our services. some of those services are really feeling it in terms of waiting time. So there's a big demand in to access our mental health services in terms of counselling provision, and there's also a big demand in terms of domestic abuse services, because as you can imagine, you know, with lockdown, that's actually brought a situation where people that are living with loved ones that perhaps are in difficult relationships, in domestic abuse relationships, actually they're now spending 24/7 together. So all their time now is spent in those difficult relationships. So you know, we've, like Faces, we've been able to move a lot of our services online, and most of that has been, you know, working really, really well. I think the last slide is just our contact details, isn't it, Faye? Is that right? So that was kind of like the main stuff we wanted to talk about, really. Just I hope that's given you sort of a bit of an insight into sort of some of the work we do, and giving you a bit of a flavour in terms of some of the challenges I get in, and obviously some of the needs of the community. But we're hoping to sort of use the next bit of time in terms of any questions and sort of a bit of a discussion.
Yeah, let's open this up to everybody who's watching. If anyone wants any clarification on any of the points that have been raised, then obviously feel free to chime in or put something in chat, and we'll go through it. Just want to say a thank you to everyone who's donated so far. We had like a £100 target, you know, low expectations, and then you're always impressed. And I have to say, we've absolutely smashed it within the first hour of Pride Week being launched. So thank you to people who are donating. I know I've seen pictures of the cakes that are being sold at the moment in the breakout room for those who are going into the office. I know that it's all limited because of social distancing and everything, but Katie has smashed it out of the park with a chocolate cake that looks, oh my God. I'm actually glad that I'm not in the office, because I'd be destroying my diet right now. That is amazing. Thank you so much, Katie. Yeah, so yeah, we have one question. What kind of volunteering opportunities are actually available at the foundation? Because we have had a few people who have been messaging me privately, and Katie's obviously put it into the chat now, saying how they could help, because it's always nice to help financially, but how can you help physically?
Yeah, so I guess I'm in a better place to answer this question, as you know, I used to be a volunteer here as well with the LGBT Foundation. So we've got a whole different range of volunteering roles that are available. You know, short-term opportunities like, you know, events volunteering, well, prior to COVID anyway, but we're hoping to start that back up again. And that can involve things like outreach. So, you know, talking to, you know, people who might be interested in our work, and making sure that, for example, that they, for example, we used to go to, you know, saunas and nightclubs and things, and making sure that, you know, that you were giving out condoms and lubes, and those general sort of safety schemes. But we also have long-term volunteering opportunities as well. So whether that's, you know, support with admin in the office, because, you know, actually they're really crucial to being able to demonstrate the impacts that we have, but also Village Angels, as Bob mentioned earlier at the start of the presentation, where, you know, that's a nighttime safety scheme, and, you know, we have volunteers who, you know, go out in the Manchester's gay village every weekend, and, you know, supporting you know, vulnerable people and things like that. So we do have quite a different range of volunteering opportunities, but if you do want a more of an in-depth look at that, then, you know, do get in touch with us, and we'd be very happy to support you with that.
Fantastic. I thought if you pass all, I've got your details anyway, and we can pass those on to anyone. I have to say, as someone who used to I mean, I'm not really, I was a scene queen back in the day, not so much these days, but the Angels, I think they were called, and they would go in there. They'd have like those. Do you remember those those things that people wore when they played netball. I can't remember the words of them, but you'd be able to recognize them, and they were always helping people who had had way too much to drink. And some friends of mine were volunteers. Tabard, that's the word I couldn't think of. Yes, so they do a great job out and about in town, making sure everyone has a safe night. Because one thing that the gay village is very much known of is about living a little bit of life to excess, I would say. Speaking of the gay village, Rob's asked, Robert Zumbell has said, has there been any impact on bars and clubs closing on Canal Street? This is obviously with regards to COVID, I'm assuming. Plus any support from the council to keep the area an LGBT one, because obviously I know that there was a lot of problems a while ago with the village they wanted to regenerate it into what would essentially become Castlefield, I guess, with lots of modern flats and everything. But I think there was a lot of there was a bit of an uproar because people were saying the village would lose its identity.
Yeah. Do you want me to? I mean, it's a great question, Rob, and I think in terms of the impact on the bars and clubs around Canal Street for in terms of COVID, I think there's been a big impact. I mean, obviously, the bars and the clubs were closed. A lot of them have now opened up again, but within restricted numbers of people and COVID compliant. And there's certainly been a lot of conversations with Manchester Pride. Although Manchester Pride not happening, we've still got August Bank Holiday weekend. So I think there's been quite a lot of conversations about kind of making sure that that space can still be done in a COVID compliant way. I think a lot of the bars, I think what the bars would say is that the bars are struggling. Obviously, I mean, it stands to reason that in terms of being shut for a period of time and also having more reduced numbers of people. So I think it, what I would say is that the village has been quite robust in the past in terms of being able to, although some bars have closed, others have then popped up again, and the village has been quite resilient. Is the word that I was after.
Yeah.
I think the village has been quite resilient, and it remains to be seen really in terms of what will happen to the village in terms of COVID, and but there's definitely challenges there. There's definitely financial challenges, and I think the other point about, I mean, the council have had some specific pots of money around COVID-19, so that's been quite helpful for some charities. I think it's probably an ongoing discussion really in terms of like what happens to the village, longer term. I mean, obviously we're of the opinion, as you would expect, being the LGBT Foundation, we're of the opinion that it needs to be, it's very important to remember its history, remember its identity, and
100%.
I mean, I got married. I was fortunate to get married a couple of years ago, and actually, what I personally will experience with my husband is that I might walk down Canal Street hand in hand, but then I'll get to a certain point where I kind of like, Canal Street ends and I'll cross the road, and my hand just slips away. That's what I experience. That's what I experience, and actually, that's not to say that there's not other parts of our city, of Manchester, that are safe and inclusive for LGBT people, but I personally don't always feel that. So actually, I think that I think it's really important to still have that dedicated space. We've tried to do, we're keen to do some more sort of like history work with others and Friends of Sackville Gardens to do some stuff about kind of the heritage and the history of the village, because there's a really strong story to tell there. There's a history war that happens, which is great. Obviously there's the symbol in terms of, there's the Alan Turing statue in Sackville Gardens. We've got the HIV, the Beacon of Hope, the HIV memorial. We've got the trans and non-binary memorial tree as well. So there is stuff around the village that kind of, helps with that identity. But I think it remains to be seen, doesn't it, what the impact of the flats will have. I mean, there's going to be thousands more people living around there. and it will, I think, it will change it in some way. Whether that's a good way or a bad way, I think is probably too early to say, really.
Mm. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how it does change. I mean, even as a southerner, someone I used to live in London, I'd be down Old Compton Street every weekend, and even Compton Street around there is all changing as well. The whole sort of face of the kind of the community is changing. So I think it's more of a corporate greed thing, to be honest, more than anything down in London. But up here, the effect of COVID, I'm hoping that the resilience of the village will be good, and it'll take them right through to 2021, and hopefully things will be getting back to, well, the old normal rather than the new normal. The new normal is not as fun as I thought it was going to be, I have to say. The novelty has worn off. I'm quite ready to go back now. I have a question a little bit left of center about PrEP. So what is the LGBT Foundation stance on PrEP? And for those of you who aren't aware what PrEP is, could you give a very short sort of overview on what PrEP is as a medication?
Yes, yeah. Shall I take this one, Faye? Probably best place for it. So PrEP is pre-exposure prophylaxis. So it's a tablet that people can take to help to prevent HIV. So it's a tablet that you would take, excuse me, before sex, and there's a series of tablets that you have to take within a period of time before you have sex and afterwards as well. So in a way, PrEP's kind of the new kid on the block, really, in terms of HIV prevention. So we were talking about the condom scheme before, and if you go back sort of like 20 years ago, then really HIV prevention was condoms and lube. And negotiation of safer sex and kind of all those communication skills, but fundamentally a big chunk was about condoms and lube. Now we've got we talk about combination prevention. So combination prevention means that there's lots of different HIV prevention tools at people's disposal that people can use to reduce the likelihood of acquiring HIV. So PrEP's one of them in terms of the tablets. Obviously, we've still got condoms and lube. Quite confusingly, I think, really, in addition to PrEP, PrEP, you've also got PEP, which is post-exposure prophylaxis. So that's a tablet you would take that if you have maybe had sex where you haven't used a condom, and you think that you've maybe placed yourself at risk of potentially acquiring HIV, then PEP is post-exposure prophylaxis, where you'd be able to take a tablet to kind of like reduce the risk of acquiring HIV. So I think we encourage people to reduce their risk of acquiring HIV and actually to use the different tools at their disposal. So I mean, the line with PrEP is that if you read stuff about PrEP, then it's encouraging people to use condoms with PrEP. But because the limitations with PrEP is that it doesn't protect you from acquiring other STIs. So it would protect you in terms of HIV, acquiring HIV, but it wouldn't protect you from, gonorrhea, syphilis, etc. I mean, our position is a really clear one. We support PrEP. We absolutely support PrEP. We feel that it's an individual's right in terms of, if you've got a tablet available that can help prevent HIV, then actually we should be using that. There's a lot of evidence about the effectiveness of PrEP. And we obviously, I think the key thing is with PrEP is about making sure that you're talking about combination prevention. So you're still talking about condoms and lube. You're still talking about regular HIV testing, and you're talking about negotiation. People having a conversation with their partner or partners. So we try and promote the full gamut, really, in terms of HIV prevention work.
And the reason I thought of it was because I was looking on your website earlier, about some of the services and guidance you've been giving people through lockdown. And one of the questions that you were asked was, can I, because there are trials at the moment for the NHS to understand the effectiveness of PrEP, even though it is, as I say, it's been used globally in the United States, and I think in Australia as well. You can get PrEP, and but over here it's been a little bit more controversial. And my stance has always been, if you can get Viagra on the NHS, you should be able to get PrEP on the NHS.
Yeah.
And Joel has just said that Scotland has it on on their health service as well.
Yeah, I mean, we England's been dragging its feet.
Yes.
England has been dragging its feet on PrEP. So, you know, you can, it's available in Scotland. In England, we've had the PrEP impact trial, and which really there was a trial before that. And so, you know, that proved it's already had its effectiveness improved. What they argue about the impact trial, and I'm on the impact trial in terms of I'm on the board of the impact trial nationally, so I should,
Oh, inside knowledge.
particularly with this being recorded, I should be very clear about that. But I think that, you know, that trial is about the fact that that's trying to test the behaviour. So it's how PrEP works in the real world, so to speak. But I completely agree. I think PrEP's already been proven that it works, both in this country and a range of different countries across the globe. I think it's you know, really disappointing that England's been dragging its feet. National AIDS Trust had to take NHS England to court, which we supported in terms of why PrEP isn't made more freely available. So it is going to be rolled out. It is going to be made available on the NHS. You know, and we're working with other charities to kind of go, well, how's that going to happen? How quickly is that going to happen? There is the option for people to buy PrEP, but obviously that online from there's places like Prepster that do a lot of, an organisation called Prepster that does a lot of stuff in terms of, you know, PrEP awareness and education. But obviously, you know, that option in terms of buying it online, that option isn't for everyone, because, you know, if you're on a low income, then actually that's not going to be possible for you. You know, and there's a lot of evidence that there's a link between poverty and HIV, acquiring HIV. You're more likely to acquire HIV if you're from a poorer background. So, you know, you throw that into the mix, and yet we're kind of asking people that they should be paying for it. So we've done a lot of lobbying behind the scenes in terms of trying to make PrEP available. But I share people's frustrations really in terms of PrEP should be kind of available now on the NHS to people in England.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Jess asks, Joel did follow up that, but I think you sort of covered it. He said, the study see how people would behave with it too. Was that continuing to use other protections as well? So when you talk about the real world use of PrEP, were people using it in conjunction with other methods of STD protection?
I think it was more in the context about whether people would take the tablets at the correct time period.
Okay.
And those sort of factors. But I mean, that's kind of like, you know, already been proven. I mean, there is stuff on the trial at the moment about things like what audience it reaches. So I think a legitimate criticism, challenge in terms of PrEP at the moment is that PrEP is predominantly reaching white gay men. Yes. So there's a question about, in terms of BAME communities, about how BAME, there's quite a lot of evidence that people of colour are less likely to access hospital services, and it's hospital services that are giving out PrEP. So therefore, actually, how do you reach people? So about the demographics of people accessing PrEP. Yeah. Is a thing that the trial's looking at. And I think longer term with PrEP, there's a thing about what is the model, because at the moment the model is, okay, you can buy, you know, if you're able to, you can buy it online, but the model in terms of the trial is about accessing it through, you know, through the NHS, through the hospital
through your
door.
GP.
You know, could it not be? What about community services? You know, so we do community-based testing.
Right.
Well, why couldn't PrEP be accessed through charities? You know, the same way that testing is, condoms is. You know, so I think that it's looking at that sort of model as well in terms of how PrEP is kind of delivered longer term.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Okay, so Jess asks, do you think the Gender Recognition Act that the Gender Recognition Act reform is needed, and do you think trans people will struggle less with their transitions if the process was less bureaucratic?
Yeah, so I guess I can take this one. So for those who aren't aware, so the Gender Recognition Act, or GRA as we know it, it allows trans people to apply for legal recognition of the gender in which they live as. But the thing is with GRA and why we need reform is because, you know, actually the process of changing your legal gender on, for example, your birth certificates and IDs and things is quite expensive. It's a very long-winded process, and actually it's just all round time consuming. So what we want, and we've been lobbying as LGBT Foundation for, you know, reform to happen, because it's actually now quite outdated, and, you know, we need to simplify the process. So yes, so we do think that actually, you know, because the process isn't expedient, it's just you know, it exacerbates some of the issues that trans people might experience. So, for example, you know, mental health issues, and it also presents challenges in terms of, you know, being able to transition. But Rob, I know that you've been involved in the GLA campaign for quite some time now, so I do wonder, you know, if there's anything that you wanted to add.
Not really. I think you summed it up really well. I think it's just about human dignity, really, and making the process as easy as possible for people.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that trans people have enough to deal with, and having to make things just more and more difficult through bureaucracy. They just need to cut that down and make things really simple. And I think that a lot of people do not understand the difference between sex and gender. And I think that then there is a level, there's a need for education to a lot of people, the majority of people, I think, so they can understand the distinction between your sex and your gender identity. Because once people understand that, I think there'll be a lot more empathy, and then things will start moving quickly with regards to cutting the bureaucratic nonsense. And, you know, even with me and 39-year-old man, I had a lot to learn very recently, because it was people have their ideas of what things are, and then as the world changes, you have to modify your belief system, I think. And yeah. Has anyone got any other questions? We've got a few more minutes. Whilst you guys are thinking of something really, really, really intriguing to ask, I just to let you know that we are going to be giving away some prizes this week as well. So we are having a raffle on Friday where there'll be 12 bottles of Proud beer, which is a local Manchester brewery, and I'm sure it's not that beer that smells like an armpit. A bottle of champagne. We're going to be giving away some Brooklyn brownies, which are also local brownies, and some Costa coffee vouchers, and a snazzy Pride face mask with matching socks. Okay, I want to win that. Totally want to win that. So yeah, if you continue to donate to the Just Giving page, then you'll be entered into the draw for the raffle on Friday, and that'll be drawn during Champagne Friday. I think I think we've come to the end. I'm looking for other people, but I have a feeling that I don't think there's any more questions. Rob, Faye, thank you so much for taking time to spend with us today. I did prepare something because we are obviously all in lockdown. And if you were in our office right now, you would hear a round of applause. Unfortunately, all I can give you is this, which is from my phone. So thank you very much.
Thank you
for everything that you do, and thank you so much for spending time with us this week. We are going to try and raise as much money as possible over the next Pride week, and hopefully you'll join us at the end of the week. I'll be on my Twitch channel. Come say hello, and we'll hopefully by about midnight we'll do like a counter thing like on Comic Relief. Honestly, Kirsty's saying thank you so much, great talk, and she's donated. Target is blown out of the park already. Olivia's saying that was an amazing start to ANS Pride Week. Thank you for joining us, Rob and Faye, and thanks to the team for organising. Kate saying thank you so much, Rob and Faye. Cheryl, thank you so much, really enjoyed it. And Smoothie says this was brilliant. So thank you so much. It has been an absolute pleasure. We put £100 in, we've raised 220 quid in an hour, so
that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Can I just say thank you for inviting me and Faye, because it's great to be able to kind of get a chance to have a chat to you, and there's been some brilliant questions. I'm loving the penguin that Robert sent in terms of the clapping. I'm loving the penguin image. I think I'm going to kind of like hunt that down and use that myself. But it's brilliant that you smashed the funding target as well. So I really appreciate everyone's time kind of like focusing on this, and obviously choosing the LGBT Foundation as your partner. Very much appreciated.
Well, I think Manchester-based place, we are the LGBT Foundation. For a lot of people who work at ANS, some more than others, it's probably had an impact on their lives. As I say, it might be from just picking up a pack of condoms and lube when they've been out in the village, all the way through to using the support services, or in my case, book group. And so thank you, rather.